you understand how dark it is? How far down the line we are? How late it is?
We are live at prisonplanet.tv for the next hour and 52 minutes that's left in the show today, simulcasting the radio show. We have Webster Tarpley joining us about 50 minutes from now to give us the latest on Obama's criminal activities. Then we're going to have Keith Bryan on from Ireland. Mainstream news is reporting that they were doing drills when the military men in Northern Ireland got shot, the British troops, as we predicted they would, and it's coming out that the guards stood down and didn't shoot at the people that were shooting. So, and with over 75% of the past attacks in Northern Ireland, and in England being connected and carried out by British Special Forces, SAS, as has been covered by mainstream British news, we are, and that's why they had to stop a lot of it 4 or 5 years ago, because it did become public. It looks like they're back to their old tricks. It's almost completely confirmed. Classic MO on that front. For the next 20 minutes, we are joined by Terry Bressi. And Terry Bressi is an individual who lives somewhat near the border, and they've now moved border checkpoints, in some cases 100 miles away from the border. They call them Constitution-free zones, and they're harassing citizens. And I would add here that we support the Border Patrol and their constitutional duty. It's one of the few things the feds do that's constitutional, and we support it. And they've got a really tough job. But at the same time, they are harassing citizens. I get reports of this in Texas. They're asking everybody for their ID. But then when sheriffs and others arrest illegal aliens for crimes, the feds won't come pick them up. They won't go after the businesses. They do a few token things. And, of course, it came out in the stimulus bill that the illegal aliens are allowed to get the stimulus money, and they don't have to show that they're American citizens like citizens do. It's literally just a double standard. So, Terry Bressi, I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're located, and some of the plethora of YouTube videos that you've got. We're going to put a few of them up on screen without the audio, showing what you go through and what happens at these checkpoints inside the United States.
Sure. I live in Tucson, Arizona, which is about 40 miles north of the international border with Mexico, and I frequent State Route 86, which is an east-west highway that takes me out to one of my remote work sites. I work up at the Kitt Peak National Observatory, and we have a couple telescopes up there that I keep running and I observe on to look for asteroids and comets in the solar system. So my work takes me along remote sections of the desert on a fairly regular basis, and this is where I've encountered quite a few checkpoints over the years.
Break down what you're dealing with and the type of things you go through.
Well, what first got me interested, or first got me involved with this issue of checkpoints, was an incident from 2002. I was traveling back to Tucson after working the day on the mountain, and I was stopped at a checkpoint that was being operated primarily by the tribal police, but there was also present the Department of Homeland Security in the form of U.S. Customs agents and Border Patrol agents who were working the front line with the tribal police. And when I pulled up to the checkpoint and was stopped, I asked the stopping officer what was the purpose of the checkpoint, and he told me that it was a sobriety checkpoint. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if it's a sobriety checkpoint, then you don't need federal agents working on the front line with local law enforcement officers to check sobriety, because sobriety is a local issue. It's a state issue. It's not a federal issue. So
just like they're now using Marines in California at DWI checkpoints to condition the public.
Yes, exactly. What I found is a lot of times local jurisdictions and the federal government, they use checkpoints that have been allowed by the courts under very limited scope. They use those as a pretext to do far more expansive operations than they would be allowed to otherwise, by claiming that it's only a sobriety checkpoint or it's an immigration checkpoint. But in reality, they're doing these dragnet type of operations where they're looking for everything from felons to weapons, terrorists, narcotics, and other things. So it's really problematic in the way that law enforcement agencies have taken the inch that was given to them by the various courts and the American people in many regards, and they've turned it into a 100-mile Constitution-free zone, if you will.
Amazing. And again, we're putting some of those videos on screen. I mean, you explained to the Border Patrol, look, this isn't a federal function, a sobriety checkpoint. We see the mainstream reports how they're targeting citizens, how illegal aliens just drive right through, but they target, people that are, whether they're Hispanic, black, white, it doesn't matter, are clearly citizens. And this is happening in some cases over 100 miles in to the United States. And we also have living on the Canadian, Mexican, the Pacific, and the Atlantic Ocean, which they call the border, where the Border Patrol's setting these up everywhere, not just on the Mexican or Canadian border. It's happening all over Seattle now. They're doing it to people in Seattle and surrounding counties. They're doing it deep into other states, Wyoming and Utah and other places. I mean, clearly this is the federal police force expanding, and you explain this to them in the videos, don't you?
I certainly do. Actually, I take that back. Going back to my 2002 incident, like I said, it was a dragnet operation that was being primarily conducted by the tribal police, and so that operation was slightly different from what I've been experiencing over the past year. In that particular operation, when I challenged the scope of what they were doing, I was dragged out of my vehicle, arrested, and then dragged off to the side of the road. I fought the charges in court. I beat the charges and had them dismissed with prejudice, and then I turned around and I filed a lawsuit. Now, that lawsuit has been ongoing for the past 5 years, and is currently in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, where we're challenging the legitimacy of the checkpoint itself. The newer checkpoints that I've come across since January of 2008 have been conducted solely by the Department of Homeland Security via Customs and Border Protection agents with the United States Border Patrol. But the problem that we see here is, once again, it's very similar, and you can see it in articles where spokespersons for the U.S. Border Patrol have stated that they're using these immigration checkpoints to look for felons, weapons, and I'm talking about guns here, narcotics, terrorists, and aliens. Even though the U.S. Supreme Court, back in 1976, they allowed immigration checkpoints inside the country, but only for permanent checkpoint installations and only near nexus points for border traffic. And what that means is where the primary traffic going to the checkpoint originated from the border. What they're doing now is, instead of conducting these checkpoints at permanent installations near nexus points, they're conducting them all over the place, along secondary roads, along roads that have no direct nexus to the border. And they're far exceeding the scope that the U.S. Supreme Court said. And what they stated was that very brief stops were allowed at these internal immigration checkpoints for the sole purpose of making immigration queries, and that any further detention or any further or any searching of the vehicle had to be premised upon probable cause or consent by the driver. But what the Border Patrol is actually doing is they're conducting temporary or tactical checkpoints all over the place, and they're admitting that they're looking for a whole host of other subjects besides just illegal aliens, and they are detaining individuals for long periods of time and searching vehicles absent consent or absent probable cause.
And also, they don't like being photographed by you, but they're there photographing, videotaping you.
Right, exactly. So, from my first experience in 2002, I learned a lot. I learned that law enforcement agents will lie when you bring them into court, that they will destroy documentation and evidence, and that they will misrepresent the nature of what they're doing. So in order to protect myself from future actions after 2002, I started carrying video cameras with me, recording devices, cell phones, so that I could, A, contact other people when I know that I was going to enter a checkpoint, so that other people know where I was and what to expect, and B, so that I could make a record of what actually happened, so that there would be no doubt in a court of law as to what actually happened. And so since 2008, when the Border Patrol set up this particular checkpoint along SR 86, that's been there 24/7 for the last year, I've documented over 70 checkpoint stops going through that particular checkpoint. And as you indicated, I have about 14 or 15 of those video encounters online.
Well, you're doing a great job, and there's video after video posted on your website. You have them up on YouTube. It's checkpointusa.com, and I mean, they get very, very belligerent when you say, look, I'm a U.S. citizen, leave me alone. Why are you out here doing a DWI or a weapons check or a drug checkpoint? They're supposed to be checking for illegal aliens. And then in every case, we find out they're not going after the illegal aliens, they're going after citizens.
Well, what's interesting is I've done a lot of research into what's been going on, and it hasn't just been limited to checkpoints. If you look on my website, checkpointusa.org, you'll also find various documents from the...
it's .org. They put .com on my sheet. I'm sorry. It's checkpointusa.org.
Right. What you'll find is from 2007, there is a study that was done by the Inspector General for the Department of Homeland Security. And what he found was that on an annual basis, the Border Patrol, through the, I think it's the Office of Detention and Removal,